Morning.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning. Okay.
It is a nice morning. It's not too cold.
Yeah, beautiful.
And no rain.
Came back from a walk. Indeed, or ice. Okay. All right, so we got up to the very top of 27A. And continuing, of course, to talk about morning practices. Tana rabbis taught, second line from the top. Me'emosai kofinas hamitos. At what time do you turn over the beds for the mourners? Mishiyesem pesach beso, from when the body leaves the house. Okay, so presumably the scenario here is, a person dies at home and they take out the body, and that's when you turn over that's when you put in the low chairs or turn over the beds, as the Gemara has it. Rabbi Elazar, that's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Misha Yisasem Hagolel, from the time that the opening. Now here he translates the lid of the casket is sealed, but it could also be from the time that when the body is covered by earth. Master Shmeis Rabbi Gamliel Zaken, Rabbi Gamliel died. So once the body left the house, Rabbi Eliezer says, how's the time to turn over your beds? And when the body was covered or the lid was sealed, Yeshua says to them, he said to them, now's the time to turn over your beds. So they said to him, we already did it because we were listening to Rabbi Eliezer when he left the house. Rabbi stopped. What about on Friday? When it's as you go into Shabbos, then there's no public mourning, and so you turn the beds right side up again, or you sit on regular chairs. So minha mincha l'mala, from mincha time onwards, meaning early afternoon, half hour past noon. Amar Rabbi Bar Huna, Rabbi said, Afal pichein, even so, any yoshev ala. Yeah, you may have turned over the beds, but don't sit on the beds, the upright bed, until it gets dark. Which is a little bizarre, right? Because we're supposed to not sit down, until then. But the idea is that in order to prepare for Shabbos, you need a little time to turn the beds over. It's a big job, I guess. I mean, how big a job? It takes 5 minutes. I mean, how much time does it really take? How many beds do you have? It's heavy, so you need 2 people, right?
You need 2 people, right?
It doesn't seem to take that long. Meanwhile, you're still, so that's the preparation for Shabbos. But meanwhile, the mourner, according to this view, is still enjoined to sit on an overturned bed until it's actually Shabbos. Mostly Shabbos, what about after Shabbos? Even though you're only sitting Shiva till Sunday morning, you still turn over the beds. Because you're still obligated in the morning practices. Well, that makes sense. The rabbi said, Hakofa mitaso. This raises an interesting question, by the way. It's like we've been talking about beds for sitting on, right? But if it's a bed, it's also for lying on, right? So are we saying that? So obviously, if you're going to sit Shiva till Sunday morning and you're going to sleep Saturday night, obviously you would need an overturned bed. So it could be implying that there's a view that that even part of Saturday night is sufficient for the last day, right? Even the part of the evening before is sufficient. The way we practice is it's the morning, right? It's an hour in the morning is considered like the whole day. So you can quit after an hour on the last day. But maybe it's referring to the night as well. Okay. Talking about Rabbi Saleh, when you turn over your bed, lo mitasa b'lvad kafan, not just your bed. El kol mitos sheyesh lo b'toch beis kafan. You have to turn over all the beds. So now we have a better understanding of Friday, right? If you have 8 beds in your house, it's going to take you a while. But filiyesh eser mitos basar makomos. Even if you have 10 homes, right? And each one has beds, kofas kul, and you have to overturn them all, even if you're not going to be sitting in them, right? The Even if there are five brothers and one of them died, kulan kofin. All of them in their homes have to turn over the beds. But if there was a bed that was not used for beds, I think we all have beds that serve as, if they're not being used by people anymore, they're being used as storage facilities. And sorry, okay, that one you don't have to turn over. It's only beds that people use to lie on or to sit on. It's also an interesting question about, we spoke about, other people, like especially at the Sudo Sabra, the first meal, right? Like, where do they sit? Can they sit on they sit on regular chairs unless they're particularly close friends with the mourner? But a regular, ordinary people or just other people sit on regular beds, regular chairs. So, like, where are they supposed to sit? Of course, that was referring to the Sudo Sabra, which took place, as I understand it, in the street or outdoors, right? Or maybe in the courtyard. And in the home, I guess everybody was expected to sit on the overturned bed. Dargash and dargash. What is a dargash? So a dargash seems. Oops, sorry, knocked my phone over there. A dargash is some kind of a bed that is constructed differently than the standard bed. We'll see in a minute. What Kumar will say what it is. So you don't have to, this different type of bed, you don't have to turn it over. For that, you can stand up straight on its head. Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, Shimon says, Dargash Matiras Karbita with no film elav. Basically, you don't have to turn over the bed. You can undo the supports, and then it'll just collapse by itself. So you don't have to turn it over. You can just kind of take out a couple of screws, and then it'll collapse, and it's fine. My dargash. So what is a dargash? Amar Arsa Digada. It's a lucky bed or a magic bed. So meaning that it's not used. It's not used primarily for sitting. It's kind of an honorary, like think of the kisei shel yo that you have in some shuls, like the Elijah's chair that you use for a bris. It's all this like big wooden upholstered thing. Nobody actually sits there, right? So that kind of chair you wouldn't have to turn over because it's not used for sitting. I'm only Rabba said only Asif. That's so. What about regarding a king? This is not a Mishnah. Call a king who's in mourning. Call him Masumi Malars. Everybody sits on the ground. Who makes it all dargash? And he sits on this dargash, like this fancy chair. So that doesn't sound like dargash means a magic chair. It sounds like it means like a throne or some kind of special, so chair that's special in some other way. Mika mide dad ha'idna lo osvine. Like if it's a chair that nobody would sit on, including the king, then how come today he's sitting on it? Like, that doesn't make sense. So it must mean something else. Maski for Rashi, so Rashi says, wait a minute, my kusha, what kind of question are you asking? It's like eating and drinking. Like, ordinarily, the king eats from the king's provisions, right? The king's got plenty of money and plenty of food. He eats his own stuff. But when he's a mourner, so you do things differently. And like other mourners, you have to feed him from other people's provisions. So the same you could say with the chair. Like, he never ate somebody else's food before. He never sat in this chair before. Today, he's sitting in that chair because, it's this unusual situation. So it's not a good question. Eli kasha, what can you ask? The Tanya, he asked from this price. Dargash ain't tzarich lichva, so you don't have to overturn a dargash. El zokva, but you can turn it on your end. The arsa degada. Now, if you're saying it's a magic or a magic bed or a special bed, amai ain't tzarich lichva. So why not turn it over? Hadanya, we have a brisa. Kofa mitos lo mitos mubado kofa or kol mitos sheish lo b'toch beis kofa. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you sit on it. I'm sorry, hold on one second, please. Hello, I'm back. Sorry. So if you don't have to, if you have to turn over all the beds, even beds that you're not going to sit on, you should also have to turn over a dargash. So why would our Brisa say don't turn over a dargash? So Gemara said, well, that's not a good question either. My kasha, what kind of question is that? It could be, you could compare this to our Brisa also said that a bed that you just use for storage, you don't have to turn over. Well, a bed that you don't use for sitting on, but is for show or for whatever, is or for good luck, whatever it is also could be excluded from turning over all the beds. Tanya, we have the Brisa, and a bed that's used for storage, you don't have to turn it over. So Eli Kasha Kasha. So here's another challenge to the with the interpretation of Dargash as a lucky chair or a special chair. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, I would say an ornamental chair maybe is a better way to think of it. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Dargash Matir Karbita V'Hunaf Omeil. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, we saw this already, that the Dargash, you just kind of have to remove the supports and it collapses by itself. Now, if you think it's an ornamental chair, my Karbita Nislay, so like, it wouldn't be constructed like that. It would be constructed in a solid way. It's not like a IKEA furniture, you know. So Kiyasa, so that's a good question. So Kiyasa Rabin, so Rabin asked, so that doesn't seem to fit with the interpretation of Dargash as an ornamental chair. So Kiyasa Rabin, when Rabin came from Palestine to Babylonia, one of the rabbis, whose name was Rav Tachlifa, said to him, what is a Dargash? This Tachlifa was a regular at the leather market. My Dargash, so he said, you know what a Dargash is? Arsa Tzla, a leather bed. That's what they call it in the leather market. A leather bed they call a Dargash. So why would it be different? Why would you not have to turn it over? Because the leather could become damaged by being in contact with the ground, right? Like we're talking probably it could be about dirt floors and it could be damp or whatever. So an ordinary bed, whatever it was made of, let's say maybe it was wood. So the wood will get wet, the wood will dry, no problem. But the leather could be stained, could be damaged in some way, and that's why the rabbi said, okay, so leather bed you don't have to turn over because it's going to be ruined. We also have this statement. Number of Yirmiyah says, Dargash serugo mitocho. A Dargash has its like the straps are bound from within. So it's like they're not attached. So think about like straps that attach the mattress, if you will, or the support or the bed. What do you call it? Yeah, like the mattress that attaches it to the frame. Typically, I gather, would be looped around the side, like the frame of the bed. But here it's saying it's like it's attached to the kind of inside of the frame. Okay. Mita serugal gaba, but a regular bed has the bindings are tied over it. So why would this make a difference? I guess that like maybe it's you couldn't even undo it, right? Like if it's fixed into the sides of the frame, then it's harder to undo or to remove than something that's just looped around the frame. Maybe that's the point. Amar Yaakov Baracha, Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, Yaakov Baracha said, "Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we rule like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that you can just untie the dargash and it'll fall out by itself." Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Rabbi Yaakov said, "Mita shenachli teha yotzin," a bed whose pillar, whose like the posters, right? You think of a poster or canopy bed, right? If the posters stick up, zokva v'dayo, you can just stand it on its end. So you can't turn it upside down because it's got these pillars sticking out of it, these posts sticking out of it. So you can just turn it on its end and you're fine. Rabbi's talk. Yashan, and by the way, here we see kind of we initially understood, or some of these statements seem to be like you turn over the bed so that you can sit on it in a unusual manner, right? And here it seems to be, and also when you talk about like you have to do it with all the beds in the house, it's not just how you sit on it, it's also you have to make some kind of a visual or a physical recognition that something has happened here, right? That things are not as usual and that someone died and so on. So it's not just for the practical purposes of where you sit, it's also to to make this recognition that one is in mourning. The rabbis taught Yashan Lagabe, he say person slept on a chair. Al gabe udnaye, or on a big like mortar or a millstone or something, not on the bed. Gedola al gabe kar, gedola mizo, or even more al gabe kar, or you sleep directly on the ground. Lo yasvidei chavasa. That's not. You didn't sleep on an overturned bed. You're supposed to sleep on an overturned bed, and you slept on the ground instead. You thought you're being even more particular, more punctilious about discomfort, but actually you haven't fulfilled the idea of, as I just mentioned, a visual recognition of something being like the bed is still where it is, and you're sleeping on the ground. Well, that's very nice, and you've put yourself in discomfort, which is fine, but you haven't fulfilled the turning over the bed thing, which is a physical sign. Rabbi Yochanan says, because you haven't turned over the bed. Okay. Rabbi's taught. You can sweep, umarbitzin, you can kind of sprinkle water on the ground to settle the dust. In a mourner's house. Umadichin, ka'aros v'chosos utzlochios v'kitonios b'veisava, you can wash the dishes. You can't bring incense and spices to be, to perfume the air, because that's a little too indulgent. But washing the dishes is not like washing yourself. It's that's like a normal activity that is not prescribed. Any Sigmar says, is that right? Bar Kapara taught, they say, but you do not make the bracha on spices, meaning at Havdalah, I guess, or even the bracha on spices you can make any time that you smell spices. It's not. We typically do it at Havdalah, but really it's a bracha, just like you make a bracha when you eat a piece of bread. You should also make a bracha when you smell something nice. But it's so brucha hudalom varchina, so it's saying you can't make a bracha on these spices to yemaitina. So it means that the spices could be there, just don't make a bracha on them. So how can you say don't bring spices to the house? Well, cautious more is not a problem. We're talking about like in the house, you can still, your spice cabinet, you can still have spices. Just don't bring them into the room where the mourner is to perfume the room. That would be too much. Okay. Hold on one second, please. I'm going to put you on hold for a minute. Just need to deliver a message. Okay, I'm back. Next mission. Ein malichin leveis ha'evel. You can't bring food to the mourner's house. Lo betavla. You can't do it on a tray, like a fancy tray. Lo be'uskutla, or in a big fancy bowl. Lo bekanon, or in a big basket. El beselling, just in plain baskets. In other words, don't be too ornate. Don't be too elaborate. And the Gemara will explain why. You don't recite the bracha for the mourners on Chol Moed, but you do stand in the rows to console them when they come back from the cemetery. And then you don't have a big to do on Chol Moed of mourning. Like you do the shura, you do the rows, and then everybody is sent home. So don't do anything more elaborate than that, to focus on the mourners or on the consoling, because of Chol Moed. En menichin samita barachov, you don't put the beer down in the street on Chol Moed. I guess the practice is, and you'll still see this at funerals, that the practice is to, when taking the body from the hearse to the grave site, the procession stops 7 times and then proceeds. So that's the practice being referred to here, I think, which is like to stop in the street, to put the beer down, and to mourn, to eulogize or whatever. Shalom lahar so that we don't encourage eulogies to take place, when that happens. Like when you stop and put the beer down, that would be a natural time for somebody to eulogize, and there's no eulogies on Chol Moed, so we don't do that on Chol Moed. And you never set down the bier of a woman in the street for her dignity. So the Gemara is going to talk about like what's the dignity problem here, and it will restrict, like it's not talking about all women. We'll see it in a minute. What's going on here? Tell her about the rabbis taught. Originally, they would deliver food to the mourners. So rich people would send silver trays of food, and golden trays. And poor people would send something in a wicker basket. So the poor people were embarrassed. He said, because they couldn't afford to send food with all the fancy accoutrements. So the rabbis decreed that everybody has to use wicker baskets. No sending stuff in fancy baskets or in gold trays, because that you're just showing off and you're setting a standard that other people can't afford. For the dignity of those who are poor. The rabbis taught when they would bring drinks, rich people would bring things in white glass, and poor would bring drinks in colored glass, which is cheaper. So same thing, poor people were embarrassed. So everybody has to bring in colored glass. We make fun of because of the dignity of the poor people. Similarly, Barishana, originally they would leave the faces of the bodies of the dead, leave them uncovered, and they would cover the faces of the poor, because poor people wouldn't look so healthy when they were dead. They would show signs of hunger. Their pallor would be different. Like a wealthy, well-fed person, even in death, at the beginning, of course, looks well. But somebody who basically starved to death doesn't look so well. So their faces would be covered. So that would embarrass the poor people. So that's why we don't do open casket funerals anymore. Even they quote on shalanim, so that everybody should look the same. Originally, they would take, and here's this word dargash again. So, whatever it means, it's a fancier kind of bed, whether it's an ornamental bed, like a mahogany velvet-lined coffin, or whether it means like a leather thing rather than a simple cotton thing. Anyway, so rich people would be taken out that way. And poor people would be taken out on basically a basic stretcher. So it would embarrass them. So everybody goes in the same and gets transported after death in the same vehicle, right? The same bier, which, by the way, as I'm sure you're aware, traditionally Jews are buried in simple pine coffins, right? Nothing elaborate. And I guess I had come to think that it's something to do with showing that everyone is equal in death, right? Rich or poor. but actually it's more focused, according to this source, it's more focused on those who are still alive, right? On the dignity of those of the family, right? That, not to look down on those who are still alive because they're poor. That's why everybody uses the same materials. Originally, if someone died of an intestinal ailment, they would use some kind of incense or spices to mask the odor. So those who were alive, those who were still alive and suffering from these ailments would be embarrassed because they would feel like, oh, that's going to happen. That's what's going to happen when I die. I'm going to smell. So they instituted that everybody, that regardless of whether your body had an odor or not, they would still place incense or perfumes with the body. So as to protect the dignity of those who are suffering from this and are still alive. And originally they would take the clothes from that a woman who was a nida, who was menstruating when she died. So her clothes were tame, right? Like any, it happened that she died. Or I guess not the ones that she was wearing, because when you die, of course, the clothes that you're wearing become tame because you're a dead body, right? But I guess like all the clothes that she had or that she was wearing, and again, we're not talking about people with a walk-in closet full of clothes. We're talking about somebody with a couple of shirts. So if she was a nida when she died, we assume that her clothes need to go to the mikvah. So then those people who were still alive, and if they were a nida at the time, they would like feel uncomfortable about, if I die, then people are going to go be washing my clothes because they're going to be thinking about me as a nida. So hiskinu shehu madbilin al gavi kol nashim. So then they said, okay, all women's clothes after they die, excuse me, all women's clothes have to go to the mikvah because of the dignity of those who were alive. Same with the zav, right? His clothes are tame, so his or her clothes. So so they would take those clothes to the mikvah. But then those who were alive and had a zav problem, they also felt embarrassed, like this is going to happen to me. So so everybody's clothes had to go to the mikvah after they died, because of their dignity. So that's a little strange. It's like we certainly don't practice that, right? That people's clothes have to go to the mikvah after they die. I'm not sure. That might be that these practices were only in the time of the temple, because there's really not a problem being tame unless you are going to the temple and doing a sacrifice or whatever. So maybe that practice fell out of use because there's no point to it since nobody can go to the temple. Originally, the cost of the funeral was worse, was worse than the impact of the death of the person. It's like, not only is he dead, where are we going to come up with the money for the funeral? To the point that people would they wouldn't make preparations for the funeral. They'd drop the body off at the funeral home and they'd leave town, so they wouldn't be stuck with the bill. Until Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, the prince, and he was obviously a man of means, and he put on a very simple funeral. When he died, he instructed that he was to be buried in plain linen garments, and basically, a low-cost funeral. So then people started following this example. You see the call for the same kind of thing in contemporary times. Sometimes you hear there's a fuss made about people are just going over the top, people of means, making weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever. And then that kind of puts social pressure on people who can't afford to do those things to do it anyway. People going to debt and so on. It's like, there are often calls for people who are known to be wealthy to put on a simple wedding, so that they can set a standard that other people can live up to without putting themselves into debt, which is the same idea. Rav Papa says, no, Alma Filu Bitsarda Bar Susa. Today, people, will be buried in like the cheapest thing you can think of, so like just a coarse piece of canvas that's just worth a zuz. So the cheapest thing you can find, and that's considered acceptable. Same idea. The Mishnah said we don't place the mita, the beer in the street during Chol Moed, because we don't want to encourage people to eulogize when you stop in the street. Papa says, "Ein Moed b'bnei Talmid Chacham." That's if it's Chol Moed, then we don't follow this practice. We do stop in the street and we do allow people to eulogize. And certainly more so on Hanukkah and Purim, which are lesser status because they're completely rabbinic. But that's only you can only do these eulogies in the presence of the beer of the body. But you can't have gathering without the body to eulogize the Talmid Chacham who has passed. Is that so? The Gemara says, "Rav Kahana Safti Rav Zvid in Nadav b'Funara." What about Rav Kahana, who eulogized Rav Zvid on Chol Moed in a different city in Pumnara, which is a different city than he died in? So what about that? So it seems like you can eulogize the Talmid Chacham even in a different place than the body is. Amar Papi Yom Shmuel Hava. Oh, that was different because that was the day on which he found out about the death. So that is like being there, being in the presence of the news is so fresh and the grief is so palpable that it's like as if the body were there in front. But the rule that you can't that you can't eulogize unless the body is there, that's for subsequent days. Amar Ula said Hesped al Lev. Hesped. So Hesped we've been referring to as a eulogy, but what Ula seems to be saying is when the word Hesped is used in scripture, then that is alev on the heart, like beating your chest. That's what it means. It doesn't mean a eulogy. That's a rabbinic Hebrew term, but Hesped in biblical Hebrew means beating your chest. Dichsiv al shadayim sofdim. They'll beat on their breasts. So this is a scriptural reference to the use of sofed, which is the verb of hesped, as something that you do to your breast. Tipuach b'yad, and when the scripture refers to tipuach, that's clapping with the hands, clapping your hands together. And kilus, another term of mourning, is beregel, that's stamping the foot. In Greek. If you're stamping in mourning, don't wear a sandal. Use a shoe. Because you might injure yourself. So it's unclear exactly like what's the problem with the sandal. Rashi says it's not as secure on your foot, and you could sprain your ankle or something. Some think that there's like the way the nail, there's like hobnails or something in a sandal, and maybe not so much in the shoe. Maybe a shoe is sewn together, so not entirely clear. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Avel kevan sheniana rosho." Once an avel kind of nods his head and indicates that it's time for you to leave, right? Like, thanks for coming. That's it. Like, don't push your luck. Don't be so overbearing to stick around when you've been indicated that he wants you to leave. And this is what you mentioned the other day, Stan, right? Is that one should take their, I guess this is the source of, one should take their cue from the mourner and how to manage the conversation. Everybody has to rise when the nasi comes into the room, the prince, except for an avel who's supposed to be sitting, on the bed, on the overturned bed, and a person who's sick, and it would be hard for him or dangerous for him. Rabbi Yochanan also said, "Lakol omrim lahem shabu." everybody, like after you get up for the nasi, when the prince comes into the room, then somebody says, okay, be seated. So chutz mi'avo v'chola. But of course, you don't have to do that. This is kind of obvious. Like you don't have to do that for somebody who never got up. Although it recalls there's this great scene in did you ever see the movie The American President?
I'm sorry.
You ever see the movie The American President? Oh, no, it wasn't American. It was The West Wing. You ever see The West Wing?
Yes.
So remember, there's this one scene where where the president has a delegation visiting him, and one of these people is like this conservative evangelist type who's like anti-abortion and everything, and basically she doesn't get up. Everybody stands up when he comes into the room, and she's sitting down, and he basically upbraids her a very sharp way that, like, in this house, when the president's in the room, when the president's standing, nobody else is sitting. So she was sitting, and she had to be told, this is somebody who was already sitting and would have to be told, now you can sit. Okay, never mind. I digress. Amar Review the second. Avel Yom Rishon, a mourner on the first day of the Shiva, Asur Lechol Lecha Mishalot. Can't eat your own food. Midamar Le Rachman Yecheskel. What's the source? Because God said to Yecheskel, the prophet Ezekiel, the Lechem Anashim Lo Sochel, in which God is prescribing to him, a mourning period which breaks all the rules. He says, and here's another rule you should break: don't eat other people's food. Meaning that in the ordinary case, you would eat other people's food, right? Rabba and Rabbi Yosef Machlefesu B'Sayil Adade. Rabba and Rabbi Yosef, they became they would like send meals to each other. It sounds like you're talking about they became mourners at the same time, although you don't have to interpret it that way. So they sent each other food for their first meal. Yom Review said, Mace Be'er, person dies in the city, everybody has to take the day off work and go to the funeral. Rav Hamnuna Ikla L'Dar Musa. Rav Hamnuna came to this place, Dar Masa. Shama Kol Shipara D'Shichva. And he heard the sound of a shofar announcing a death. Chaza Hanach Inche D'Kav De'avitan. He saw people still at their jobs. Amalu said to them, Levi Hanach Inche B'Shamta. You shall all be excommunicated. Don't you know that there's a dead person, that somebody died, and you should take off work and go attend to the funeral? They said, oh, there's a chaver kadisha here. Don't worry about it. Like there are people who are designated to take care of the funeral arrangements, so the rest of us are allowed to work. Amalu said, oh, if that's the case, then it's fine. It's like, if there's no organized chaver kadisha, then you hear about somebody's death, you should drop everything and go see if any help is needed. I guess it doesn't mean that you have to take the whole day off work. That sounds like it means that you have to make sure, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that the dead is attended to. If you have an organized way of doing so, then that's great. Then the rest of the people don't have to work. It says, a person who grieves too much, he will, he's like putting a down payment on more grief coming later, right? So again, this is something that's seems somewhat insensitive, right? It's like, how do you tell somebody how much to grieve? Although, on the other hand, I think we all can imagine situations where a person grieves to a point where it's not healthy. He has to be able to move on and at some point, or but you can't really prescribe that. People. I mean, this is a common complaint of people who've lost, especially a spouse or a parent or a child. After a time, people expect you to get over it, but it doesn't work that way. Everybody has to process it in their own way. But as I said, on the other hand, sometimes you need intervention. Sometimes it really is debilitating, and so it's presented here in the Gemara as a value judgment. It's like, don't do this because you're going to suffer later. But I think if we view it through a different lens of, sometimes you need help, you need intervention, then it's a little more palatable. or even not palatable, but important, an important lesson. There was a woman in the neighborhood of Rav Huna. She had 7 sons. One of them died. And she was, grieved excessively. Shalach la Rav Huna said, Lo tavdei hachi, don't do that. Lo ashkach beit, she didn't pay any attention. Shalach la, he said, Eat saitas mutaf. If you listen to me, and like don't be so extreme, then fine, be low. If not, savis zavdasa liidach. Like you're gonna have to like make preparations for the next funeral. And indeed, another son died. Misu kulu, they all ended up dying. So Farmal in the end, he says, Timush zavadita lenafshech. Now it's like if you grieve too much, you're preparing for your own funeral, right? You're grieving over yourself. And Misa, and indeed she died. That's a particularly disturbing story. I will just leave it there without comment. So the source for this is a verse in Jeremiah, where he says, "Don't cry for the dead, because he's not coming back to you. Like you cry all you want, but it's not going to help." So we're interpreting that don't cry too much. And don't shake your head. Don't whatever. Literally shake your head. Yoser mikashir, more than the usual. Okay, so how's that? It's normal to cry for 3 days. The Shiva Haspid, it's normal to talk about, eulogize the dead for 7 days. It's normal to go 30 days without like fresh clothes and not cutting your hair. But after the Shloshim, God says, are you like, are you more compassionate than I am, right? So, and it's like, get a hold of yourself. If God decided that it's time for this person to go, it was time for him to go. I understand you cried, but it's time to move on. Don't overdo it. The verse continues, cry for the one who leaves, for the departed. We're talking about somebody who leaves, who dies without children. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi wouldn't visit a Shiva house, unless the person had no children. Because it's written, because of this verse, cry for the departed because you're not going to see him again, or he's not going to see you again. So, this is kind of, he interpreted as he's not going to return to his heritage. Well, because he has no heritage if he has no children. Okay. Rav Huna says, no, this verse is talking about somebody who repeatedly sinned. So, in other words, he's not coming back. Not that he won't return, but that he won't repent. We're talking about someone, cry for somebody who didn't repent before he died. Rav Huna, and this is consistent. Rav Huna is consistent here. Because he said, once you repeat a sin, hutralo, it becomes like, you treat it as something that's permitted. Like it's not, you don't even consider it a sin. So the question is, hutralo, so what? You really think it's permitted? You become accustomed to it as if it were permissible. So in other words, once you repeat it, if you repeatedly do the same thing, the same mistake, or the same sin, then you don't really think about it in a way that encourages you to repent. Levi says, a mourner in the first 3 days should think of himself as though there's a sword between his legs, or maybe on his shoulders is another version. In other words, like you should hang your head, basically. Like your whole demeanor should be submissive, or someone who doesn't care or can't do anything about his fate. Mishlosh Shiva from the third day to the seventh day. Kilu Menachos Lo Keneged Keneged Karen Zavis. Now you start to stand up a little straighter. It's like the sword is not on your neck. You're not quite that observant, but it's in the corner of the room there. It's like you still have an awareness of, calamity. After the Shiva, Kilo verse Kenegdo B'Shuv. Then it's like, people are carrying guns in the marketplace. It's like, that doesn't mean it's, threatening me that much. It's a little more, you're basically like everybody else. Okay, we'll stop here. Tomorrow we'll pick up with the issue of why did they say that that women's beers never stop in the street. So we'll address that when we pick up tomorrow.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dov.
Thank you.